Namaste, my friend. We have understood the two steps. First step was the knowledge of the real self. The real self is of the nature of permanent peace and happiness, love, truth, and wisdom. And the step two is to think, speak, and act in the world 24 by 7 with a proper right attitude. And in a single phrase, if I explain the second step, if my attitude is always of the giving nature, it will change the entire life. Our ego is a consumer. It is always seeking something, expecting. The greater the expectation, the greater the emotional dependence. Greater the emotional dependence, it causes attachment and expectations. And deeper the attachment, greater the expectation, it leads to intellectual paralysis, intellectual fantasy. And that results into sorrow, suffering, anxiety, duality, conflict that we have already understood in the last few sessions. Today's session focuses on to recognize the inner self. That inner self is one, present in all the beings and the things in the world. And the moment we recognize the inner self, we can replace that mind or that I thought, that ego which is constantly seeking, expecting. It's a little subtler topic. You need to pay attention. You have to listen to it again and again and again until that understanding settles in your mind. So let us do a smaller practice so that we are relaxed, quiet, and calm to start the journey. Eyes are closed. Adjust and align your body. Find yourself here comfortable, looking at the neck joint mentally. Feel the sensation, comfort and steadiness. Shoulder joints, be there. Feel the sensation, comfort and steadiness. Look inside the body. First look outside the body as if the mind is moving on the entire skin of the body from the top of the head to the toes, and experience sensation, comfort and steadiness. In that state, you are looking inside the head. You are aware of what the mind is doing. The mind has many uninvited, unwelcome thoughts. Let it come and let it go. Let it come and let it go. How you are an observer, you are watching these unwanted, unwelcome thoughts coming and going. I explained you like the highway having a 3 lanes. The mind has also the 3 lanes. So lane 1, unwanted, unwelcome thoughts are coming and going. Lane 2 is an observer. It is like you are standing across a road and watching the traffic. All are nothing but the ground. So we have divided the ground into 3 lanes. Lane number 1. And lane number 2 is just above because you are standing across the road watching the traffic. So that is what the intellect is: an observer, a knower, and a seer. The moment you are watching these thoughts, you separate yourself from all the unwanted, unwelcome thoughts. So what happens because of this separation? Discernment in the intellect takes the mind to the state of calmness and peace. Asato ma satgamaya. You're saying in your mind, Asato ma satgamaya. Asato ma satgamaya. Meaning is, lead us or move from the false to the real. What is false? Anything, any object, anything that is constantly changing is false. And that our ego changes millions of times every day. In the morning it says, I'm happy. After an hour, you drink a cup of coffee, you don't like it, and you say, I'm upset with this taste of the coffee. You see, this is what the I is. Then in the afternoon, that when you I is constantly changing, and we don't recognize. If the I is constantly changing, it is not the real I. That is what we are going to talk about it in today's session. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. Let us move from the ignorance to the wisdom. That is all about the knowledge. So first thing, the intellectual understanding, and then the knowledge has to be internalized so that the understanding is settled. When the understanding is settled in the intellect, it takes care of the mind. The mind cannot create an emotional dependence. It cannot cause the intellectual fantasy. That is where we are heading to. Mrityorma-amritangamaya. 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 Lead us from the mortality to immortality. Means fear of the death. Fear of the death is unknown to us. And in fact, what dies is not me. I am real self. It is pure consciousness. Consciousness never dies. What dies is the body. And body follows the universal law. Whatever is changing has to change the name and the shape and the form. So body is constantly changing since birth. And because it is changing, it modifies itself. One, it has to go. So when I say that I am the body, I have a fear of the death. When I realize My knowledge is internalized and settled that I am not the body. So then I never die. I remain as a pure consciousness. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Bring your mind on the right hand, your mind on the left hand. Lift your both the palms, place it on your eyes, open the eyes inside the palms. Know your experiences, bring the hands down. And so the step one was the knowledge of the real self. Or you can say in today's session, that is the inner self. So we have understood that real self is of the nature of peace, happiness, love, truth, and wisdom. It never changes. It is all pervading. Why we say it is all pervading? It is the same real self in you and me, in your relations, in your enemies, in your friends. How do you say? You have 10 buckets of water in the afternoon, and the sun is reflected in the 10 buckets of water. We see 10 suns. Are there 10 suns or only one sun? In you with your body and the mind, in me with the body and the mind, and we feel we are different. Are you getting it? But otherwise the real self is only one. The sun is only one. It can reflect in millions of buckets of the water, and that bucket is the body. The water is the medium, is the mind, on which the real self is reflected, and we feel as if there are 10 different suns in the 10 different buckets of water. This body is like a bucket. That is the journey of the self-discovery. So after understanding intellectually what is real self, our second step, I have taken a couple of sessions. So how to help our mind to engage itself in thought, speech, and action in a giver mode, in a giving mode. Why in a giving mode? Because in a giving mode, we can realize the real self. So what about the expectation mode? In expectation mode, that I-ness, that ego is always expecting. It covers, it veils. Ego is like a curtain that covers the real self. So the second step is almost about the karma yoga, means the inner attitude. The moment you are living, you are thinking, speaking, and acting, check the attitude inside the mind. It is in a giving mode. What happens? You are always in peace and happy. The giver is always happy. The consumer is always upset. Do you see that consumer is always upset in the life? So then comes the third step. If we, by the second step, we want to get rid of the ego, there must be some doer. If the doer is not, how can I perform the action? But before performing the action, we have to recognize what is that inner self in me, in you, in everyone. If ego is absent, means the doer and the experiencer is absent, the life becomes very dry. It does not make a sense. So we have to understand the third step where the master says you have to discover first, become aware of the inner self, and dedicate all your actions to that inner self. Sometimes the inner self is also known as the God, so pay attention to it. We will talk about the God and the inner self, but we are focusing on the inner self, recognizing intellectually by understanding what is this inner self. You go to the kitchen, you prepare a cup of tea, you go to the workplace, you're taking care of your work. So you are a doer and you are also a knower. You know what you are doing. So for every change in the world, for every action in the world, we need a doer, we need a knower, and we need an action. I'm speaking, so you see the doer is a speaker. Speaking is an action, and I know what I'm speaking. Some intelligence is working behind it. Some intelligence is working behind that speaking, speaker, knower, and the doer. Can you say I'm speaking? Yes, normally we say. But the seeker knows it is the lips, the tongue, the larynx, and the lungs, plus the mind and the memory knowledge inside are participating. That makes one a seeker, but the seeker is nowhere. The speaker is nowhere. Who is the speaker? Is the lip speaker, tongue speaker, larynx speaker? We are going deeper, I told you. You have to pay attention. No disturbances should be there outside. Your total focus is there. I can say I'm moving my hand. I am. So I am hand? No, I'm not the hand. So there is some power behind the hand that is moving. But hand cannot move unless there is a knower. One knows here is a hand. And there has to be some resolve to move the hand. So pay attention. What is that attention you are paying? I am not my lips, I'm not my larynx, I'm not my tongue, and still there is a speaker. I'm speaking to you. But mind, intellect, ego, they are not I. So there is some force behind, or I would say, you say there is some intelligence behind that speaking which we forget to realize. And that is the inner self. Hold on, no worries. If you do not understand, no worries. You can do the repeat listening. But I'm making the things clear step by step. Inner self, Eastern wisdom, our master says there's an inner self. It is not the body, it is not the mind, it is not the intellect, it is not the thought. That inner self, you can say it is an intelligence, it is consciousness. That is behind every thought, speech, and action. It is behind every change in the non-living beings. It is present in everything of the universe. We need to understand clearly, because the third step depends on understanding that inner self. Now keep in mind, this mouse is a matter. Matter is inert, dead. Why we say it is a dead matter? Because it does not know itself. I'm holding the mouse, I'm consciousness, so I know it. But the mouse does not say that I also know you, you are holding me in my hand. So all the matter, whatever is visible to us is all matter. It is inert. It does not know itself, it does not know others. And still the matter is changing. You see the matter is this, my lips and the tongue, the matter is changing. So who brings that change, who moves the lip? It is the intelligence, it is the consciousness. Behind the lips, behind the tongue, behind the larynx, behind the lungs. Who is changing the sun? Sun is revolving, the moon is revolving, all the planets are revolving exactly at the same place, same location. There has to be some intelligence. If the intelligence is not there, these all the planets will strike against each other and there will be a havoc. We couldn't be alive. So there is some intelligence. That intelligence is the consciousness. That intelligence is the inner self. You can say that is the knower, that is the doer. What about us? We have limited intelligence. We have a limited doership. I cannot be present at two places at the same time. But that inner self, because it is present in everything, it is present in all the locations and all the time. If that intelligence is not there, if it is absent, the air can change its shape and the form, but air never changes its shape and the form and the quality and the traits. The earth never changes. The space never changes. The water remains the same whether you drink the water here in India or in Africa or in Antarctica. It is because of that intelligence. The space does not become the air. Air does not become the water. It is because of that intelligence. That intelligence is the inner self, present in me and present everywhere. Air does not become something else. Space does not become something else. It is, so there must be some intelligence. So where there is intelligence, there is a consciousness. So where there is a consciousness, we say it is the inner self. Inner self, not the outer self is my ego, I thought. Earth, sun, planets revolve around their center. No accident takes place. How can we say I don't meet with any accident because of my intelligence, because of my awareness, because of my consciousness? That is the inner self. There has to be something intelligence which is working day and night. They do not allow any accident to happen. But when the ego takes over, every time we meet with an accident in terms of anxiety, duality, conflict, problem, suffering, where there is ego, there is always a suffering. So ego is because of the emotional attachment, emotional dependence, expectation. And because of that expectation, we live in intellectual fantasy. We do not have any power to change the water, air, and the space. We did not create them. Anyone who created them is present inside to help them to work as they are doing. Water doesn't become the space, it is because of that intelligence. The space doesn't become the earth, it is because of that intelligence. You build a mansion, you build a house, and you destroy it. The space remains the same. Water remains the same all the time. It is because of that intelligence. That intelligence, that consciousness is holding, guiding, inspiring. The water, you should remain as it is. But because of the ego, we change. We have to replace this ego. Take another example. You buy a BMW or a Mercedes or Tesla nowadays. It's a luxury item. Perfect engine is there. The screen is there. But unless the driver, means the doer, and the knower of that car sits there, car doesn't drive by itself. Do you see that? Similarly, for every change, for every action that is happening in the world, it is because of that inner self. You can say it intelligence, you can say it consciousness, you can say the knower. There is a knower present everywhere. The way behind that car, or you can say behind that engine, there is something conscious. I am a driver. I know, and that's why I can drive. Look at the tree. Orange tree remains the orange tree every time. Mango tree remains the mango tree all the time, even if they take the same nutrients and fertilizers from the ground, from the field. It is because of that intelligence. That intelligence knows the orange tree must bring the orange fruits. Mango tree must bring the mango fruits. It is not the work of the scientist. Scientist has no say there. There is something, the inner self. Look at this body. This contains more than, if I'm not mistaken, 60 billion cells are present in the brain, and another trillions of the cells are present in the human body. How the group of cells knows and it converts into a physical eye, it is because of the intelligence. How the millions of the cells converts into a nose, it is because of that intelligence. Converts into teeth because of intelligence. Converts into the lungs and the respiratory system and the heart because of that intelligence. I told you that intelligence is consciousness, that consciousness is the knower and the doer, my friend. Every cell, how the food that goes inside and digest it. I don't say that let me sit down and digest the food. I don't know. Are you seeing the truth? Trillions of the cells. One group of the cells becomes my hand, another group of the cells becomes my lung, third group of the cells becomes my heart, fourth group of the cells become my head and eyes and the sense organs. There has to be some intelligence. There has to be some knower. There has to be some doer that is different than the ego. That is the inner self. And that inner self is present everywhere. In every object, in every name, in the form. It is present in the air, it is present in the space, it is present in the universe, it is present in you, it is present in me. The carbohydrate, protein, vitamins and minerals, they do not know how to convert itself into a nose. There has to be some intelligence, how to convert itself into the eyes and the heart and the lungs and the entire body. That intelligence tells us that intelligence works in the body but separate from the body. It is separate from the body. It is independent. We are approaching to the real self, but we are just talking of the inner self at this time. Because if matter, this is a matter, and this mouse contains the intelligence, but it cannot manifest itself. Why? Because it is not conscious. We are conscious. But still, the inner self is present here also. How do you say? You cannot make the plastic into the shape of the mouse unless the intelligence is present there. They are held together. We may say, I build my house, but every brick, every foundation, what is that foundation? Foundation may be a brick in the wood. But if the wood does not contain the intelligence to remain together, how can you create a wall? Intelligence is found in nature, is its own. It is not belong to the nature, it comes from somewhere else. That nature is functioning body, functioning of all my sense organs in coordination because of. So where there is intelligence, there is a consciousness. Where there is a consciousness, there we can get an idea of inner self. That is what I've been talking. Now I will differentiate between the real self and the inner self, but there is an inner self or intelligence present in everything that makes the thing worthy. Body is a matter. You see that body is just a matter. We all know. So intelligence is not the nature of the body. It is different than the body. How come you say that? Liver is functioning normally for 20 years and now abnormally. It means what? It means what? The liver does not have its own intelligence. It comes from somewhere. That intelligence may work or may not work. Is separate from the liver. My eyes can see. But because of that intelligence, if the intelligence is not there, have you seen sometime the babies are born blind and then they examine, they say, okay, we will do some changes in the eyes, we will do this surgery, and ultimately we will find. So that consciousness, that intelligence starts working through the eyes and we can see. Behind every cell, intelligence is working. That is the inner self. That inner self carries the activities of every cell. That is the reason one group of the cell becomes the eyes, second group of the cell becomes ears, other becomes liver, and third becomes pancreas, and the whole body is created. And the intelligence is still independent and separate from it. That is the consciousness. Eyes are open. Objects are in front of us. So it is the inner self that guides the eyes to see, ears to listen. That intelligence never makes a mistake. Our ego always makes the mistake. That intelligence never makes the mistake by saying, eyes, why don't you hear? Nose, why don't you listen? Why don't you see? It never says. But when the ego, the emotional attachment and expectation, they enter into the mind, it creates a false eye. That does the mistake. And when the ego is gone, then we see the things as it is. We hear the things as it is. In sleep, we do not know anything. Where is our body and the mind? But the inner self carries out the functioning of the heart and the lungs and the blood and the entire body. When we wake up in the morning, it is because of that inner self. That is the inner self. It is the doer. Ego is not the doer. That is what we are trying to understand deeply. That is the inner. Without knowledge, intelligence, how the liver, heart, lungs, cells of the body carry out its activities. No way. Without even mind knowing it. Because I don't know yet. I know my inner ego only, I thought only, thinker only. So that veils behind this ego. Body is the matter. We all know. So intelligence is not the nature of the body. Matter, mind is also a matter. Mind is also a matter. Inner self is intelligence, different from the mind. That is why we become upset. When you become upset, so it means it is not, mind is not the nature of intelligence. Why, otherwise, how it become upset? Where the intelligence goes? That intelligence, that inner self is working. In Eastern wisdom, we, instead of saying intelligence, we say it is inner self. That inner self is working all the time, 24/7, without stopping. At the same time. What do you mean by same time? Your and my body is working because of the inner self. The earth is moving because of the inner self. The sun is revolving because of the inner self. The crop is being grown in the field because of the inner self. The animals are working because of the inner self. Air is air because of the inner self. Space is space because of the inner self. Because of inner self is not the property of orange tree or liver or sun or moon. It is independent. It is separate. It is one in everything. If day and night does not happen because of the same inner self, some intelligence is working behind it. We need to know what is this. That intelligence, that inner self pervades the entire universe. Because it pervades the entire universe, and that inner self work intelligently, perfectly with everything and object in the universe, creating a harmony. We cannot do it because the ego is always limited in its knowledge, in its scope. The world is constantly changing. It is in flux. For every change there must be an intellect. For every change there must be something behind that change. There must be an intellect. But no, behind that intellect there must be a power of action. So if there is a power of action, there must be some doer. If the power of action is there, must be some intelligence. And intelligence means consciousness. Consciousness means that consciousness takes action. It has to take action by resolve, by an intention. Let me raise my hand. So I have an intention. So there must be a cause of every change. That change is affected by the inner self, whether you say intelligence, whether you say inner self, whether we are understanding the step number 3. You can easily understand the step 3 if you have followed clearly the step 1 and the step 2. Now you can say, oh, can there be an inner self behind the storm? No, it is happening because of the air pressure. What is behind that pressure? After all, there must be some cause. Behind the air, pressure is created and so that there is a star. Behind that pressure, there is an intelligence. Behind every change. Behind every change, there is an intelligence. That intelligence has to be conscious. If it is conscious, it is consciousness. And that inner self is of the nature of the consciousness present in everything, every object of the world. If you give the cells to this mouse, it will also become conscious. Still the inner self is present here. It does not have the proper instrument to manifest. There is intelligence behind any change. So for the change to take place, there must be some power and there must be some doer. And that doer, there must be a knower. So that is the inner self, different than the ego, mind, intellect. We cannot break the rules of the universe. Why? That inner self is working in harmony. When I said we cannot break the rules of the universe, it means, can you bring the bucket of water from the sun? The nature of the sun is not liquid. It is hot, it is fire. Can we eat from the ears? No. But we start eating from the ears because of the emotional attachment and the duality and a conflict, and then we fall back. We start suffering. Do you see that? He has such a big house, I don't. He has such a good car. Now he insulted me. He appreciated me. He praised me. We are already praised and appreciated by the inner self all the time. We do not need praise and appreciation from anyone in the world. We break the rule because of the ego. We enter into the emotional attachment, that is breaking the rule. We enter into intellectual fantasy, that is breaking the rule. And the moment you break the rule, you start suffering. Because we don't see it is the inner self carrying out all the activities. We have to rediscover that. We have to live with that. It means what? If we cannot break the rules, then there must be something powerful, all powerful, we can recognize as a doer inside us. It is conscious. If it is unconscious, then it cannot have the intelligence. Unconscious, you already know it. It has to be conscious. It has to be all powerful. It has to be all pervading. It has to be the all doer. It has to be all pervading. It is present in the air. So that intelligence pulls the air into air. Intelligence present in the air moves inside. Then intelligence of this cell, it is the same inner self. It checks that there is a harmony. That air does not go into the eyes, it goes into the nose. Look at this. I'm amazed when I read this principle and understood how amazing the principle. We are not aware of that inner reality, inner self. It is conscious entity. It cannot modify itself. It is beyond time and the space. Because if it modifies, it changes itself, then there will be a disharmony in the entire universe and the cosmos. Then the air will be converted into the water, the eyes will convert into the ears, the teeth will be converted into some other part. Total dysfunctional. It is because of that intelligence, which the science has yet to find out. So the entire universe with its change cannot happen without the presence of that consciousness. And if it is consciousness, then it is beyond time and the space. And if it is beyond the time and the space, it has to be all pervading. And if it does not change, then it is present everywhere in the universe, in every object, in everything of the universe. It is the conscious entity. That conscious entity, the religion says God, but don't make a decision yet. We will go slowly. We are not following any religion and cult, dogma and the belief. You have to intellectually understand. You should have a clarity. So we say it is a para prakriti. We will discuss, understand what is this para prakriti, that inner self. That inner self is also with the outer self of the body, mind, intellect, ego, thought, feeling, emotion. So when the inner self is working in unison with the body, breath, mind, intellect, and the ego, you're always happy. But inner self is veiled by the ego, your preferences because of your expectant nature, emotional dependence. Then it starts working with the same body, breath, mind, intellect, and the ego, and it causes unending sorrow, suffering, duality, conflict, etc., etc., etc. That inner self is not the part of the body, breath, mind, intellect, and ego. Remember this. That, that, that I, that inner self is not the body. That inner self is not the mind. That inner self is not the ego. That inner self is not the thought. That inner self is not the anxiety. That inner self is not the stress. That inner self is not the tension and the suppression. Because it does not change. It remains the same. So we have two eyes. I know I'm going faster or slowly, whatever you feel. Tell me if you have any concern, if you have any doubt. There are two eyes. One eye, I'm limited. What is that eye? Is ego. How it works with the mind, with a limited intelligence. Limited intelligence. You have a limited intelligence. We don't know any lot of things. I don't know everything about you. You don't know everything about me. You don't know everything about your son and the daughter, what they are thinking about you. But still, I create an opinion that they might be thinking about you because of the expectation, and that causes the worries to me. So the inner self breaks the harmony of the outer self, and then we fall into stress and suffering. There are two eyes. Two eyes keep working in us all the time. One we call is the ego, I thought, limited intelligence, working, functioning, confused, false, create wrong notions all the time due to emotional dependence, mental immaturity, and the intellectual fantasy. And what about the inner self that is present in me? It is. Second is behind the ego. It is unlimited. It is always free. It has an unlimited intelligence. It is all powerful. It is infinite because it is present everywhere. It is always in peace, happiness, love, and the joy. How to identify the false I and the real I. Remember, the real I never undergoes a change. False I always undergo a change. It changes every fraction of a second. Fraction of a second, yes. You are happy listening to me, and once you talk is over, you become unhappy. In the morning, you're upset. In the afternoon, you're happy. Then in the evening, you take a coffee and you have a pleasure. And then you say, I have a pain, I'm anxious, I have a problem. You see, this I is constantly changing. We have to recognize 24/7 this changing I is the false I. You, that I. There is one more I that is present when you were born, when you became 10 years old, the same I, 20 years old, the same I, 30 years old, the same I. That I is the inner self. And the another I, You say, I'm becoming old, I have become young. No, that is the false I. How can you say that? Science says every 7 years, every cell of the entire body undergoes change. It is replaced as we change our car. So it means every 7 years this body dies and I don't know. And on the other side, I claim I am the body and I have a fear of the death. If I'm 49 years old, my body has changed 7 times. 7 times, can you believe it? False I always changes. When you recognize it, you can also recognize the inner self that never changes. I can tell you that false I changes more than 50,000 times every day, consciously, habitually, impulsively. 50,000 times, yes. Someone knocks the door, you open the door, your son is there, and you smile and you welcome. And suddenly your mind says, no, he has come for this motivation. Second I. No, mom, can I have a cup of tea? And you say, okay, you're not in a mood. Third I. But still you force yourself to prepare a tea. Fifth I. That is the false I changing constantly. I am stressed. That is one I. Before you are stressed, you were happy. That is the second I. I am relaxed now. It is not I, it is the mind. Why? The stress and the relaxation are experienced by your mind. Inner self is different and separate from it. So when we like and dislike something, it is intellectual fantasy. It belongs to the intellect. It does not belong to the inner self. It belongs to the ego. I like you, then after some time I dislike you. I invite you because you are related to me, but I feel upset with you. That is another inner self. That is not the inner self, that is the ego. So I have to recognize now onward, every time that I changes, it is not it is not the real I. Look at the entire world outside of the people, with people and the situation, favorable and unfavorable conditions. It is because of the false I. Inner self always gives us the best, the greatest and the highest. It instantly looks for the harmony in any given situation, condition, people, relationship. We have to discover that inner self. The world is changing. It is the nature that is changing. We were kids, now we are young, and you can say yes, whatever there is, we have to respect the universal law of the change while knowing the inner self. Let people change. Recognize and accept it. Who does not accept the I thought? When the I thought does not accept it, so we are going against the law of the change. When we are going against the law of the change, what happens? I create a conflict and a tension in the mind. That takes the shape of anxiety, duality, conflict, and the problem. The law of the change never stops. We try to hold it. We try to stop it. Why? Because of the I thought. Because of the ego. Why? Because of the expectation. Because of the desire. Perhaps no living species complain except a human being. "Oh, I have not a good house." Does an alligator complains about where they are living? Tiger complains about it. Tell me, even a fly, a mosquito, insect, they all contain the same inner self, they never complain. We always complain. So that I which complains is the false I. We have yet to learn the way with the inner self in harmony. Body is a matter, body does not contain that intelligence. Inner self is not the part of the body. That is why the body starts growing, it reaches to a limit, after it becomes old and then it leaves. It is subjected to the law of the change. We are unnecessarily scared of the birth and the death. Same thing with the breath, because the breath gives us the energy and it is subjected by the hunger and the thirst. That breath is not me. Inner self is greater than this breath. I'm not the breath. We get hypnotized by the life. We become impulsive. That is the reason we become impulsive. Same thing with the mind. It causes the emotional dependence by experiencing the sorrow and the joy, pain and the pleasure. 10 times the one guy appreciates you and one time he does not pay any attention, we get hurt. It is because of the same I. And mind is not the inner self. The intelligence behind the mind that is present. Intellect, likes and dislikes. Why this happens to me? Because I feel I'm the body. I'm living in ignorance. Because I feel I'm the mind. Because I feel I'm the breath. Because I feel I'm rich. Because I feel I'm the poor. Because I feel I'm stressed. Because I feel I'm anxious. They all are changing. What is changing? Just drop it. Separate from it. Then only we can find. We have created millions and billions of I's, ego in us. And they are constantly fighting against each other. Oh, don't say anything, even who cares? And your son is upset because of his own reason. And then in the evening you get angry, you get upset, you keep on thinking, you react it. Look at this. How many times you were upset with your son and how many times you were happy with your son? It is the same false I. Tell the false I, I'm not supporting you. Did I tell you this story? Dad and the son were walking into the streets of Manhattan. The son saw the cops handcuffed a man and moving into the street. Son asked the dad, why man is handcuffed by these two guys? Dad said, these two guys are the cops. And the guy who is handcuffed is a criminal. So the cops have a duty to catch the criminal and handcuff them. After a few more steps of walking, the son saw 10 cops pushing one person handcuffed into a car. Son asked what they are doing. Dad said, cop caught the hardcore criminal. That's why you have 10 cops. And he's handcuffed. He cannot be controlled by only 2 or 3 cops, so 10 cops are controlling. After a few more steps of walking, a motorcade was passing by. Couple of police cars moving in front. Then the entire street is full of the cops all around. Then the second car, third car, and in the middle of the car, president motor was moving. So the son saw hundreds of cops taking care and guarding the president. Oh, son said, oh, there must be an extremely hardcore criminal. That's why we have so many motor cars and the police, cops, and etc. Dad said, stop this nonsense. He is our president of United States. And all the cops are protecting him. Do you see? Is he handcuffed? No. All these cops are our ego. We have to make them our servant. We have not to make them our master. The moment you make them your master, the ego says, I'm stressed, so you're stressed. I'm anxiety, you're anxiety. Then the cops do not listen to the criminals. And that president is the inner self. Inner self is not at all affected. Do you see that? He controls. Rather, the ego protects. Ego has changed its ways. Ego needs to be made servant of the inner self. In case of the president, all cops salutes the president. Have you seen any cops saluting the criminal? Until we know the real self, what we do avoid ego in the cops. Remember the 2I. We still have to work on the third step. Listen to it at least 5, 6, 10 times, and just you sit on a lazy chair and start thinking, understanding inside. You become aware of something behind the ego. There is a consciousness, is the inner self. Thank you, my friend.